is a web series that features inspiring entrepreneurs as they meet the challenge head on. Scaling Through Crisis amplifies the stories of the small business owners, startup founders, and scale-up entrepreneurs that are thinking big and finding opportunity in crisis. Scaling Through Crisis is brought to you by Business Day in partnership with Endeavor Nigeria. And Endeavor is a mission-driven global organization that believes that job creation, innovation, and overall prosperity flourish where there is a robust support for high-impact entrepreneurs. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome our guest today, Mr. JR Kanu, who is the creator of the app Reach, an expense and money manager. This app has helped thousands of young people across Africa to better understand and manage their money. He's also the author of the book Money Brain, Career and Money Management in Your 20s and 30s. He is a builder of African businesses, lover of African art, and an avid reader, writer, and huge advocate for the cities of Jos and Lagos. So JR, it's really a pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Lily, for having me.
Most welcome. So first of all, let me start by asking you how you're doing in this COVID-19 pandemic.
So I think there are two ways to answer the question, right? How I'm doing mentally and how I'm doing physically. So physically, I'm well, I'm healthy. I am home, which is always a good thing. I don't know, like I can't remember last time that I spoke to you, but I just welcomed a new baby into the world. And so thank you very much.
Beautiful baby boy.
Yeah, right? Yeah, he's fantastic. Yes. So my wife and I are very careful about going out. So so that transitions us from, we are all healthy physically, but also really just aware of the need to be extra careful, So yes, I think it's definitely having its toll in terms of wishing you could hang out with friends, right? You just come up with a new baby. There are all these aunties, uncles, parents that want to come hang out, and you have to be careful. But
I can only imagine. It must be an interesting period for parents welcoming newborns in this time.
Virtually. My parents haven't seen him yet. It's been a while and they haven't seen him yet. Yeah. So on that, it's a bummer, but we know that it's what we have to do for the period in which we find ourselves.
No, fantastic. And I hope that your son will soon be able to meet his family and his grandparents.
Yes, hopefully.
Okay, so Jared, thank you for letting us know how you are. So I met you last year, and I was privileged to meet you last year at the Impact Investors Foundation conference. And I was so amazed by your sheer passion for financial literacy, and also just wanting to share knowledge with the young ones. So I was privileged to get a copy of your book. And I actually gave it to my brother over Christmas. My brother is 17 and 18. He just turned 18. And and I made him tell me what he learned about your book. So for those of us who are watching and are not familiar with you, please tell us about Reach, and also tell us about your book as well.
All right, so Reach and then the book. Reach is a tool, it's an app that helps people understand and manage money. So I separate those two things because understanding money is usually the harder hurdle, because once you understand it, managing it comes a little bit easier. Once you understand that your finances don't have to be something scary, once you understand that it's like you don't start saving when you start having enough money, but that it's something that you build into your lifestyle. So we teach that first using things that we all understand. Apps, right? All of us have these things that we use on our phones, and so Reach has turned personal finance into a gamified app-based system for seeing your transactions. So if you've not used Reach before, go to the Google Play Store. If you have an Android an Android phone, and just search for Reach Expense Manager, and you'll find it. And automatically, all those different SMS alerts that we get, right? All the ones that our banks send us every day as we make different transactions, it takes all that information and it turns it into graphs and insights about your spending, as well as recommendations for how to spend. You can create a budget, and then every week it gives you updates on how to live. So that's what Reach, the app, does. And then, it became clear that there was a little bit more we could do for people. We could actually sit into this stuff and create a more guided approach to how you understand and manage your money. And because a lot of people would ask us questions, and the questions spanned career and money management. And so early in 2019, the team and I thought, you know what, it would be cool if we had kind of like short stories explaining financial management. And then that concept actually grew over the course of a few months into a whole book that we then published. So the book Money Brain is a guide that talks you through the beginnings of your career, how you choose what you study in school, how you find internships, how you find your next job, all the way through to how you manage the money that then comes in from that job, or if you become an entrepreneur. So we are all about career money management at Reach.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. So I've actually I've been on your website. I have an iPhone, unfortunately, so I wasn't able to download the app. But it's just so interesting how the app and the book come. So they kind of come together in the sense that you can use the app to track your expenses and kind of practice essentially what is in the book. And one of the things that my now 18-year-old brother said is that it was specifically like a very specific guide on everything that people have to experience as they go into adulthood. So you talk about internships, you talk about saving, so where does your passion for wanting to spread this message come from? Because it seems like it's a very specific way of living for you.
So there are two distinct stories that really, I think, help me understand and answer that question. So I am a child of African parents. I am the firstborn son of African parents. More specifically, I am the firstborn son of Igbo parents. So if you've ever been a firstborn child, you already know there are high expectations of you. Now, as an Igbo son, those expectations go through the roof because you're not supposed to just take care of yourself, train yourself. You are then expected to train your siblings behind you. So I think that sense of being a big brother is just the way I was raised. And so even among my friends, any of them will tell you that I am always the same person. I am big brother who's always checking, making sure you're doing the right thing, making sure that you're being smart about life. And then after I was 12, my parents had, like the Twilight years type of baby that shows up after everyone has been born. So I have a baby brother who I am now watching as he's doing life. So, as he was starting, looking for internships, picking what to study in school. And then he felt really, really lucky because he had a big brother he could just ask questions, who could give him advice. And his friends would also ask me questions and ask me for advice. And I just thought to myself, okay, if this is useful to them, maybe it would be not a bad thing to take this, crystallize it into words, and actually have it for people to use when there's no big brother around, so they can read instead.
Very interesting. I like that story and the big brother, the big brother aspect of it all. Okay, so I'd like to pivot a little bit. Now that you've told us a little bit about what your company does, a little bit about your book, I want to talk specifically a little bit about the pandemic. As you know, the COVID-19 pandemic, took us all by surprise about 3-4 months ago, and life has kind of been a bit, bizarre ever since then. So I wonder how your companies have been affected in this time.
Yeah. So I think the first thing that I think the first thing is always when people say, how does Reach make money, right? Because you are helping people manage their finances. So how does Reach make money? How do you survive? And it's important that I start by explaining that and then talk about how the pandemic has affected and changed our business model. So when we met last year, we were Android only. We were teaching people about their finances. We had this book out. So in addition to obviously publishing a book and earning revenue from a book, the company makes money in two primary ways. One, through market research. So because of the access to people who are managing their money, we can answer questions better. So brands come to us to ask people what they are buying. You will find surveys on the app asking you about your recent purchase. We even did a survey recently that was published in partnership with FBN Quest about the economic impacts of the pandemic. And so there's a market research arm to what we do, which is a big practice of ours. And then we also lend money, right? So because like basically if you are good at managing your personal finances, it means that you are a reliable person who can borrow and repay money. And so we also lend. So we have a lending business as, in addition to our market research business. So when COVID hit, two things became clear. One, the lending business was going to suffer because a lot of people had lost their jobs. And in our impact survey, we found that most people had their salaries slashed by an average of 40%. So you go from your salary that you were earning. So yeah, for some people, it's actually as low as they've slashed to by 80%, but the average across the board we found was about 40, right? So so it's been hard, just to say the least. It's been hard. Just to say the least, it's been hard for many people out there. And so to handle this, we then started talking to, in fact, we were approached first, and then it became the spark that lit a new path for us. Employers who wanted to bring us in to actually help their employees learn how to manage a smaller amount of money, right? So you're sitting here thinking that it's all over. And honestly, we as a company, we've been through worse times, honestly, than what we're going through economically now. And that's, you can come back and ask how we survived, those bleak days. Because what we then found in this year was our lending business, obviously took a sharp turn, but then our kind of like consulting with employers has been on a rise, helping their employees understand how to manage a smaller income. On the other hand, because you can no longer go out to do market research and surveys in person, brands are now turning digital. So we're now having many of the conversations that were not happening last year because maybe you were using a more traditional market research agency. People are now turning to Reach because they want to know if there is something they can do that is contactless. How do you still connect with consumers reliably without actually exposing your research team and those consumers to issues of the pandemic?
I mean, that's very interesting. It's interesting to see how the dots connect. So, the passion for wanting to spread a message of financial literacy now actually puts you in a position to have all this information and all this data, and data essentially is becoming, key to people's market moving decisions. So I can see how that would have probably taken an uptake. It's interesting to note that you said that your lending business actually decreased. I guess some people would probably assume that because people were receiving less, they would probably be borrowing more, or maybe that's an incorrect way of looking at it.
So I wouldn't say it. So the lending business as we had it had to change.
Right.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. So as we had it, it no longer could remain in light of COVID, because that business was built on the amount you earn is what is based on the amount you earn is what you get, and so on and so forth. So if you had a loan at one rate, but all of a sudden your income has dropped, right, you can see how that becomes a sharp issue. And so while the demand for that has gone up, the risk associated with that also went up dramatically. And so the way to manage that risk for us was actually to pipe down on, because again, we are stewards of other people's money, right? We enable a lending platform. We are not the ones who own the pot of money. And so for us, it was important that we were being good stewards of the money that was put under our management. And so we switched instead by saying, okay, we have to slow down on this because it's no longer a safe bet to make, because people don't even know where they're going to be. And it's more important to actually double down on helping people understand how to better manage money when you don't have as much of it as you used to.
Okay, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. And just one last question on COVID-19 before I pivot to the next section. In your opinion, how can businesses, I guess, in your industry deliver better outcomes in this time of crisis? So like private sector collaboration, public sector support, grants, like what advice do you have for businesses in this time?
So really lean into your relationships. So last year, there were a lot of new business relationships that I made without knowing where they were going to lead. There was BD, as we call it, business development activity that was happening in terms of just putting out information, new research studies we would put out and share among business leaders, various things that then have us meeting people who we hadn't met before. Now, some of those things in 2019, did not turn into any kind of business opportunity, but then those people that I stayed in touch with, became friends with, even though there was no business per se at the time to be made, are the ones who you're still checking in with, and you hear what their problems are, and you realize that you have an opportunity to pivot. So in our case specifically, right, when I talk to you about, going from lending as heavily as we used to say, okay, let's actually slow down, and like basically shift the band as opposed to like lending broadly to everyone the way we were, tightening our reins around what we're lending, and then leaning in with employers to help them train essentially their employees. That was a big shift for us, but that didn't come out of the blue. That came from relationships. So it doesn't matter who the person is, a great idea can be sparked from any conversation. So I'm hoping that as we are socially distanced physically, that we are actually picking up the phone, getting on video calls like we're doing today, and checking in with people to find out what they're going through. Because the next nugget for your idea, next nugget for your business can come from one of those ideas.
No, I mean, that's a great point. Partnerships and collaborations are key, especially in this time. So I think garnering relationships and keeping in touch is definitely key. Okay, so thank you so much for speaking to us about the global pandemic. It's kind of like a sore topic to talk about. So I'd like to move on to something else. Your book, Money Brain. As I mentioned, I personally, gained a lot of value from reading it. My brother did as well. And I've, everybody that I speak to that's read the book has great things to say about it. So, essentially, whether you realize it or not, your success or failure in several of life's endeavors can ultimately boil down to your mindset. And Money Brain, Money Management in Your 20s and 30s is essentially a book about nurturing a mindset that teaches your brain to master and navigate issues of career and money. These are issues that every young person must face in these critical years of early adulthood. Okay, so I'd like to, it's obviously a book that everybody can go out and get. I'm sure you can get a copy online. But what are some of the things that you would say, young people struggle the most with when it comes to finances and money?
So one is the myth of enough. So you will never have enough money. I know it's hard to hear, it's harder to believe, but there's actually never enough money. And so I write a column on Business Day, and one of I think the last one that was published, I was talking about how when I was in university and I was working as a student in university, I started saving back then. And I think this money myth is the idea that if you start saving now, you won't have enough, or that you need to have enough before you start saving. And I will call people's attention to the idea of a frog in gently boiling water. I think some of you have heard this analogy. And humans are very much like that. We adapt. The willpower to adapt is maybe not given equally to everyone, but it's possible. And knowing that it's possible means that you can train it into yourself. And some of the trainings that I encourage people to start is decide on an amount that you will save or put away every month. And sometimes it's the physical activity of moving it to a different account. Sometimes it's the decision that you will not spend beyond a certain limit, right, of what you earn every month. And that's where budgeting comes into play. It's very important that people understand that budgets are not a fun suggestion. They are a way of life. And if you don't budget, no matter how much money you make, you actually will be losing a lot of your very hard-earned cash, especially now in this pandemic. So do you understand your expenses? Have you been tracking them? Do you know what you spend your money on? And then secondly, have you set a budget? So both myself and my wife, before we got married, right, independent, both firstborn children, I don't need you to know, like we were just who we were, very much like, you do you, I do me.
Your wife is beautiful, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And when we got together, we kind of were just like living financially parallel lives. Like we see something we want, we just get it. We weren't really discussing whether or not we should. We just did it. And part of it is, you're starting to do life together for the first time. You're understanding each other. And then one day we sat down, we're like, come. The things that we weren't doing as singles, why are we doing these things as married people? Like we both had budgets before. Like let's actually sit down. And I remember the shock, because obviously like it's hard not to use the Reach app when you are the founder of the Reach app. So we would sit down and look at our finances.
Yeah.
And we watched literally as we cut out 60% plus of our monthly expenses. We cannot tell you specifically that our lives are worse. So it makes us wonder what we were spending that money on in the first place, right? And it's small choices.
That's huge.
60%, it's huge. So, and then we shifted that money into a mutual fund. And I remember we had this joke where, because again, we're buying data, and many young people spend a lot of their money on just data, especially now, right?
Yeah.
And there was a point when we just started saving, the interest we were making on our savings was at least covering our data expenses for the month. Now it's doing better than that, right? Now we can do data, multiple times over, and that's that. Now, if you are single and by yourself, imagine the power you have. So like master this on your own, because being with somebody doesn't make it easier. It actually makes it harder. So I think in terms of just how I'm learning about what young people should be doing as they figure out money, the expense and budget lifestyle is a lifeline. Think about that. 60% that we cut down, and we cannot say that our lives are worse because of it.
So it's like non-essential things that you probably just need to have a conversation about, and
you don't even realize they're non-essential.
Yeah, really interesting.
And sometimes it's about timing, right? So I know that's a big one. Another one is how you manage family and personal needs. So especially in the African context, right? Like many of us are also like supporting parents on some level. Many of us are supporting siblings as well. And not having a budget for that can also add a lot of anxiety to your life, because you always don't know if you'll have enough. And when we put a budget, the good thing is you are able to send money reliably and consistently. So that was pretty cool. But because you've been saving, when something horrible happens, when there's a big emergency, which unfortunately is a possibility, we were prepared, because we actually had to deal with that, recently, and we were prepared. So I can't say it enough, right? If there's one thing you take away from this as a way to manage your money, please commit to budgeting and expense tracking.
So essentially, like, incorporates everything from, emergencies to, what they call black tax, or, everything needs to be incorporated into your budget.
So I think you need to explain what black tax is, because I don't know that everyone here will understand what that is.
Okay. All right. So black tax is kind of, a coined phrase that is used to describe I guess the money that goes into taking care of your siblings or your family members, and that typically is associated with the Black race. So I'm sure other races do it as well, but essentially it's kind of this coined term that refers to the act of giving back to your family once you have become independent, or when you've started working. I don't know if I've described that properly.
No, I would say that. And I think there's something beautiful about it, because it's not just Africans, it's not just Caribbeans, it's not just African Americans, it's all of us. All of us as a race. Is, like, we're known for taking care of mom and dad, aunts, uncles, siblings, whatever the case is. And so as a company, we actually celebrate that, right? We put a provision for that when we're building out budgets for people. So if you've ever, and by the way, since we started working with employers, one of the requirements is that we build an iOS app. So it is actually happening. It is happening.
I was gonna ask you about that.
Right. So it is actually coming. Thanks to all those employers that are working with us, it is coming. And so, like, knowing yourself, I guess, to know thyself and to thyself be true, right? Know that this is part of life. know that you do have to take care of people besides yourself, and celebrate it and plan for it.
Absolutely. I really like that. Okay, so speaking about building things and scaling, raising finance for businesses is one of the most difficult things that young entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of all shape, from all walks of life experience. So, talk to us a little bit about how you were able to raise finance for your business and what that journey was like.
Okay, so I feel like there's so much I need to say, so I'm going to try to do it in like maybe 3 points.
Okay,
Maybe
great.
it'll end up in 5. So the first point, you will always be able to raise more money sooner rather than later. Meaning before you ever start running your business is actually the best time to raise as much money as you can, as much as you possibly can. So one thing that I did was I'm almost saying don't do what I did because it's the harder way to do things, and we'll walk through that. So what I did was, let's say you can raise $50,000, but you're like, I can probably build this business for $10,000, and then you choose to raise maybe $15,000, right? So imagine that. I'm using dollars because I don't know who else is logging on, so I'm using nice round numbers in case you need to do a conversion. So with that in mind, right, I was like, why give up too much of your company up front? Why raise more than you need? But then your plans will always change, and you will always need more money than you planned you were going to need. So that's the second point. Okay, so when the dream is big and people are excited to see that you're starting a new company, and they're just happy that they can be part of the story you are telling, they will actually, there's just only upside, right? It's only upside. There's only a big dream. Once you start running, it becomes about what do your books say, what are your sales, what are your numbers, and once the numbers get involved, it's a lot harder to raise as quickly as you might have when the idea is first born. So that's the first point. With the second point being that you will always underestimate how much you need to run the business that you've put down on paper. Okay, then the thing that people almost always care about is like, well, how do you raise money, right? How are you able to find capital for your business? And the ability to raise money actually starts from, unfortunately, birth. For some people in the world in which we live, the mere color of your skin predisposes you to getting capital faster than other people, right? So it's now about how do you stack the cards in your favor, especially if you are starting out at a quote unquote potential disadvantage. So it comes down to how well you do in school, and sometimes you need some tangible proofs that you have done well. Sometimes it's the school that you attend. Sometimes it's the distinctions with which you graduate. And then after you've dealt with education and pedigree of education, the next thing that can give you a leg up is the kind of experience that you have had, right? So one thing I say in the book that, especially when you're starting out your career, it doesn't always matter where you work, but it matters what you do wherever you work. So if you are the reason a small company goes from obscurity to popularity, no matter how small that company is, if you achieve that, any other company is dying to hire you. So these are like some basic things, right? If you have all the nice names of different places where people can work, it also it's like a signaling effect. It says to people, oh, this person was hired by this company that everybody knows. There must be something there. So there's something to be said for that too. But sometimes at a big company, it's very hard to prove yourself. You are kept in line, and so it's very hard to actually stand out and shine. So it's a balancing act. Sometimes if you don't have the big company pedigree, have the big experience pedigree. Show that you've actually been a big part of building a company's success. So once you've done that, then it's now about the story you tell. And who is most receptive to the story that you specifically will tell? Sometimes it's your friends and your family. Sometimes it's the random stranger investor that you meet at a pitch event. Sometimes it's a former boss, which is why you never burn bridges, right? Sometimes it's a former professor. So in my case, it was a combination of these people. It was friends from school, it was friends from church, it was professors, right? It was a combination of people in my life who heard what I was doing and said, yes, actually, because when you start, nobody knows whether or not the idea is actually going to work. If we're being honest, nobody actually knows. On paper, it could look like it's going to work, but what they're really investing in is you. And so your integrity as a person, which is why I say it starts from birth, is very, very important. If what people say about you is only good stuff, it's that this person is reliable, this person commits to his or her word, this person does not screw people over, so on and so forth, it actually goes a long way to being able to secure financing. And when people don't have a way of vetting you, the easiest way to raise capital is to go to your friends and family.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. There's really quite a bit to unpack there. Okay, so I wonder, the next portion of this interview, I want to talk about your experience before, Reach, kind of, how you were able to, connect all the dots to get you to where you are now. And then we also have quite a few questions from the audience as well. A lot of people have some questions. So what I'd like to do is, speak a bit about how you ended up where you are now. So you worked as a journalist at Black Enterprise and Esquire magazine. You were also a technical advisor for the United Nations Millennial Villages Project. You've helped to launch cook stove manufacturing facilities in Haiti after the unfortunate earthquake. You've also dabbled in investments. You've done a lot of amazing things. You graduated from, so you have an MA in journalism from NYU and an MBA from Stanford University. So all fantastic institutions. You also joined Conga in November of 2014 as the vice president in business development. And essentially, you worked very strongly on Conga Pay and essentially made it a standalone product. You've also founded the Design Institute of Lagos, and you also have a BSc in mechanical engineering from Calvin College. So there's a lot. There's really a lot to unpack. And that's one of the things I was worried about in this interview. I'm like, I feel like we're gonna go on and on because there's just so many things to talk about. So
you make me sound bad, Lily. You make me sound bad. You make me sound like I was like going from degree to job to degree to job.
No, it's not even to make you sound bad. I think I'm amazed at how much you've been able to do. And I think if anything, I'm hailing you for for the journey that you've had. So talk to us a little bit about it. You started off, in journalism, in a bit of engineering. You have investing background as well. So how did you end up now being the CEO and co-founder of this movement, Reach, and also the author of Money Brain?
Thank you, first of all, for calling Reach a movement, because we do definitely think of it as a movement.
It absolutely is a movement.
Like you can live your best life. I don't care how much money you're making. You can do better than what you're doing with the same amount of money. So thank you for saying that. So this journey, because it really is a journey, right? This journey started off with so this is going to sound kind of corny, but a desire to, I was 12 and I was in boarding school, my classmates were all hanging out and I had this really clear vision. Again, 12-year-old boy in JS3 at the time, I believe. I remember where I was in class. So that tells you I'm not just I grew up in Jos. Jos, Nigeria. I went to Baptist High School, Jos. And I remember thinking, man, wouldn't it be cool if, there's a company and the people there were also my friends. And of course, I don't know what a company is, right? I'm a 12-year-old, we're crying out loud. Wouldn't it be cool if we built a company and the people were also my friends and we were just I remember we were doing stuff, right? This is 12-year-old me who, by the way, if you see any of my old-timey pictures, you will laugh. they are quite hilarious because I am so nerdy. I still am quite nerdy, but like, yes, I would read books for fun, but like big, like the bigger the book, the better, right? Like I am that nerd of a child. And I just like had this moment and I was like, okay, whatever. And I just like kept on playing, hanging out, whatever it was. And then when I went to school and decided to do mechanical engineering, the thought was, you know, what does Nigeria need? What do I need to study that I can bring back to Nigeria and actually just like make Nigeria fantastic so that that idea that I had as a 12-year-old can actually now happen? Because I was like, man, if we can just like figure this out, it'll be fantastic, right? Like this is again, at this point, 17-year-old me is now doing mechanical engineering. And then I graduate with honors. I am so excited to go to the workforce. And then I start working and the job is not inspiring. And I'm like, excuse me, what exactly is happening here? So how does this get me back to Nigeria? Like how does this get me to that vision that I had of this 12-year-old who is going to then one day hang out with his friends, building this company that's going to be awesome and changing lives? Like, how do we get there? And so after 2 weeks of working, I resigned. So my poor parents, I think in all this, my parents had actually suffered the brunt of my decision making because I just quit my job and I moved to New York City from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I did not tell them, just showed up, took another job. And I started helping young teenagers who's most of them were in the inner city where like, you know, moms and dads aren't there, no big brother. So like, by the way, this big brother thing has been a constant, right? So like I basically took a job as a big brother to a bunch of 16, 17, 18-year-olds who were preparing for university. And so while I was doing technical work at the company. I was like network engineer, but the real thing that gave me the most joy was actually the time I spent prepping them for university, because many of them were the first people in their families to ever attend a university. And while I was doing this with them, asking them to, you know, dream big, think about what they're going to do, I was also like deeply like asking God for direction, because remember, I'm trying to get to that, you know, that picture that I had. And one of the kids who I remember when I met her, she was 14. Her name is Jackie. She is now an executive director at that place where I was working, by the way. I was like, you are going to come back and run this place. But she was so committed to her passions, her dreams. And I was like, you know what, why don't I was really good at writing. Many of my professors at school were like, why don't you quit engineering and just become a history major and just write for a living? I was like, please, I'm a Nigerian child. I'm not about to give my parents even more heartache. I'm going to finish my engineering degree. But then in that moment, as I'm telling this 14-year-old to be brave and to, you know, dream big and to drive hard, I'm like, okay, are you doing the same thing yourself? So I applied to NYU's journalism program, not expecting to get in.
Awesome program.
Fantastic program. The magazine writing program specifically. So I was like, I'm going to apply, and it may not work out, but let me try my luck, as we say in Nigeria, right? So I applied, and within a few weeks, and remember that I'm applying as a mechanical engineering graduate.
Right.
So, but I needed to send them writing samples. And thankfully, again, these professors who just don't like to mind their business, God bless all great teachers out there because they do change lives, had made me write a bunch of things. So I had a lot of writing from my various, my econ class, my history class, my religion class, my philosophy class. So when NYU asked for writing samples, I actually sent them, right, all these papers that I had written. And I got this call from the dean of the program telling me that if I wanted to come to the program, they would make a way for me to come to the program. So this is why I really do believe that like my steps were ordered. And so that's how I was able to, like, so again, remember, my parents do not know any of this is happening, right? Like I have not told them. It just, you know, they're like so proud, like, you know, their son just, it's so great. Their son has graduated from, you know, school with a mechanical engineering degree and honors, of course, you know, all this stuff. They're so proud. And then 6 months after graduation or something like that, after I'd done, or maybe 8 months. Anyway, I'd applied I'm like, so just so you know, I am going to be doing journalism. So, because they thought I was going to be getting a master's in mechanical engineering naturally, right? That's what you do. You naturally. So I called them, but I was like, but don't worry, you don't have to pay for it. And as all good African parents know, should be school, and I'm not paying for it. Okay, at this point, like you can't be angry. The boy has found a scholarship. It's a good school, but journalism, like they were really, really worried about what was going to happen, and but again, they weren't going to stop me. And I started the program, and in the first week of the program, I ran into there was the NYU program had invited a bunch of editors from different magazines and newspapers to come in for the orientation day. And one of the editors was lost in the elevator looking for the building. And so I led him to where the event was happening. It turns out that he was the managing editor of Black Enterprise magazine, who then offered me an internship. So that's how I started. That's how I actually started interning. And so that's why even in the book, I take internships so seriously, because internships literally built my career. So now you know kind of like how the story is winding. So I'm writing. I'm at Black Enterprise for about 2.5 years. I'm writing about a lot of people. I'm also doing some personal writing. I'm traveling around Africa, writing about different things. And I think to myself, I don't want to be the guy who's always telling other people's stories. I want to try to tell a story, because remember, I'm still trying to get back to that 12-year-old vision. And so I spoke to, at the time, there was this professor who was doing some really cool research, a Columbia University professor who was doing research in Africa. And I was telling him, listen, I have this mechanical engineering degree. I can also write. Maybe I can come and tell stories about how your team is doing stuff on the African continent. And he had just been tapped in by the UN's Millennium Development Project. And so that's how he hired me into that project. So that's how I ended up at the UN, to answer that question that you said earlier. And while doing the UN stuff, I was like, man, I cannot see, and please, I'm sure this is not great stuff for people who are at the UN to hear, but I was like, these people have been in Africa. I can't really see what they've done. I don't know what impact they're having, but the impact I see, it's happening with businesses. It's happening with entrepreneurs. It's happening with companies that are coming in, creating jobs. And so when I was at the UN, I then applied to business school, and that's how I ended up at, yes. Is the story now complete? I didn't talk about Conga because I feel at that point it just kind of like makes more sense, right?
No, it definitely makes sense. So essentially you've been trying, almost kind of like trying to get back to that dream of like when you were 12, the company that, you have fun with your friends. But essentially this company ends up being a startup called Reach. And you've actually gone, to several other countries. I know you were in Dubai recently.
So yes, I did talk about the book in the Emirates.
In Emirates, yes.
Yeah. So at a school in the Emirates, I was invited to speak about money brain, and because everybody needs to know how to manage career and money. And Reach is operational in Qatar as well. So I again, in my many, I told you, keep in touch with friends. Relationships really matter. I have a friend who happened to have been in Qatar, and it was like, please, I need this app for my life. And so Reach can be turned on in a new country in 2 weeks. So actually it's easy for us to open in a new country. So we opened in Qatar, but we're also live in Ghana and in Kenya. Yeah. Fantastic. And the team, you've been to our office,
Yes.
I do get to work with my friends. So it is pretty fantastic. And even though we're remote now, we do still hang out on.
You do still hang out, yeah. So, it's interesting. There seems to be, as much as, hard work seems to be, embedded in your, in how you do things. There's also a theme of, destiny and faith
and blessing and fortuitousness and
yeah. Okay. So we'll get back to kind of this portion of the conversation. Right now, I want to go into some questions because I feel like I'm being selfish with my time. All right. So I have a question here from Lucky. He's saying, how can one build a good investment portfolio, and what assets do you think should be added to the portfolio?
I love this question. So as every good investment person will tell you, do not use this as all the advice in your life. I am not liable for any investment decisions that you make, but I will talk about some general broad principles that are healthy.
Okay.
So if it is possible, right, look at where the biggest life expenses are happening. I'm assuming that you've done that already, right? For many people, they don't think that they should get a roommate. If you're single, they don't think they should actually split their rent in half. But that's one of the best ways to actually start saving a good chunk of your money, how much you're spending in rent. So live with other people, get a good core of friends that you can live with. I mean, the cheapest I've ever lived in my life was in New York City because I lived with roommates. I mean, my
Right.
rent in New York is still the cheapest rent I've ever paid in my entire life. Okay. So now coming back to the different places
Yes.
to, yeah. I'm hoping that you have some safe investments, right? And safe investments are things that are properly regulated, things like mutual funds. I think treasury bills used to be a thing. It may no longer be a thing, especially if you're in Nigeria. I think they've actually
Mhm.
changed the rules on who can access it. But through mutual funds, you're getting close to treasury bills rates, and you can recoup money quickly if you need it for an emergency. So that's what my wife and I do, right? We pool our money together and we keep it in a mutual fund because every day you are earning interest on that money. So better than just leaving it in a bank where they'll just be charging you fees. And again, if you're a bank watching this, let's talk, let's make you better. But really move it. If the bulk of your money is sitting in a bank account, not earning interest, please at least while you're thinking about what to do, move it to a mutual fund. There is a way to quickly make a mutual fund account on the Reach app, or you can just or if you have questions about anything I'm saying, just email stories, STORIES at reach.africa. And either myself or one of my many friends at the office will answer a question about this for you. So please at least make sure that you're at least doing mutual funds. That's like, if there's one thing I wish I knew from the beginning, right? It was just that instead of keeping money sitting in the bank, I did that. The next thing is how you invest in yourself, because in many ways, especially at this age, you are the thing that is making yourself the most money. Does that make sense? Like your ability to ask
Mhm.
for a raise, your ability to get a great job, your ability to take courses that make you more valuable so that you can ask for a raise. So I'm hoping that like as a person, you are increasing your net worth on a personal level by doing all the trainings and holding yourself to a high standard at the job you do have. Then
Mhm.
the next thing that many people attempt, but is very, very dangerous, and I have lost a lot of money by doing this. So only if this makes sense for you in your particular situation is real estate. Right?
Mhm.
Many people, especially when you're in Africa, you can buy land for relatively cheap, right? And wait a couple of years and it'll go up. But the issue with that is it can be prospecting. If you buy it in a place that is not yet ready, you know where you at least you think you can afford, but you don't secure it properly, you don't get the right documents, you can get played. So real estate as a class of investment is great. If you can get a piece of real estate, even like go in with other people to actually own a property that is already being lived in, much
Mhm.
better, that is being built much better than just prospecting land. Because then land just like has a way of like going down. So those are the two like basic ones I'll start. There's some other things that people always throw out there, but I'll never say those ones because if they're not regulated,
Mhm.
and I don't tend to ask people to go and try anything that is not regulated. So I really keep it in the world of there's again land and real estate that's properly regulated, and then you have mutual funds also properly regulated. So please think about those things. Um, and the final thing, which is another way to do it, is if you actually do have a business idea that will generate money, right? Equity is a great way to grow your personal wealth, but it's a very risky way. So we can come back to some of the times when I thought Reach, was done for, and how we, came back from the dead. But those are like the key ones I would suggest to Lucky.
Okay, cool. So we have another question here from someone called Tammy. She says, she or he says, what books change your mind about investment and finance? So I guess your top books for, obviously, apart from your own book, other books that have changed the way that you think about finance and investment.
So I'm about to pull up my list here.
Okay,
So
great. Please,
excuse me.
please do.
Yeah, because there is one book specifically, um, and they don't pay me to endorse this, so just give me a second. Okay, finance and money. Okay, so for entrepreneurs, built to sell. Built to Sell really, really just shifted the way I understood and did business.
Mm-hmm.
Then, hang on, there it is. The next one is called Set for Life.
Set for
And
life.
it's written from a US perspective, which is a big kind of like downside if you are not in the US system, because a lot of it is about mortgage and house flipping and all of this stuff. But it does handle one thing really well, which is understanding your personal finances and learning the importance of making sacrifices early in your life, so that when it's time to actually be enjoying life, you are not wishing you had made those sacrifices.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one.
So those are for me, those are the two that I know that like I've I've read more than once
Okay.
around this stuff. There are other ones, but I haven't read them personally. I don't recommend what I have not read myself.
Okay, cool. So we have a couple of other questions, but you made a point earlier, and I wanted to.
And of course, Money Brain. Let's just be clear. You
I mean,
must go and get Money Brain and read it, because it's
so
built
where can
from
people
an
actually get Money Brain? Where can they purchase it?
So for the month of July, you are in luck. Go to rovingheights.com.ng or rovingheights.ng, but just Google Roving Heights. And Roving Heights has a deal going right now where you can get the book 20% off. So you can definitely get it there. But if you are not in Nigeria and you want to get it electronically, it's on Amazon, it's on Kindle, and it's on Apple Books. If you're in Kenya, it is available. Actually, you know what? Moneybrain.reach at Africa. Everywhere you are, it'll tell you where to buy it. So moneybrain.reach to Africa. Yeah.
Fantastic. So you made a point earlier about how you've experienced times with Reach that you felt that the business was going to close. So I wonder if you can go into that a little bit.
Yeah. So just before the best time in the company, there was the worst time in the company. So it was, I believe, August. So the period was from like June to August last year, where kind of like all the clients that we thought were going to come in didn't come through, and the money that we had raised, that we had been judiciously. Oh, that's the other point I wanted to make about raising money. When you do raise it, spend it very, very, very frugally. So if there's one thing that all the investors have said that has surprised them, is that the amount we raised has kept the company going this long. So imagine that you raised about, say, 20 million naira in 2016, and it's almost 4 or 5 years later, right? And by the way, obviously we finished that money and we've made other money, and things are happening. But like, that's the idea. Like, how carefully are you spending your money? Anyway, so the money we had raised had just run out, and we hadn't yet started making revenue. And I was like, this is about to be the end of it. So, but the revenue was there. We had different deals in the pipeline. It was about to close. And once it closes, I knew that we're going to have money for a long period of time. So like all the ingredients were there, but the timing of them had just not clicked. And so I'm God bless all the many friends. Again, when I tell you relationships are everything in this life, I can't say it enough, because there are times when other people have believed in Reach for me, right? When you're like, because the entrepreneur's life is a very kind of like hard and lonely one sometimes. So yes, you know that your wife loves you, and so she will believe in you. You know that your parents love you, but some African parents will tell you that you shouldn't do entrepreneurship. And then you have these friends who are like, oh no, this thing cannot shut down. How much do you guys need? I'll front you the money, and when you guys have money, please pay me back. And that happened 3 different times. So that brought a strong humility and a renewed sense of mission to what we're doing. But B, it had me thinking some really hard truths. I was like, what is the end point? So I was like, by August, I said, if we were still needing to borrow to keep going, I didn't want to do that. I would actually shut the company down. And one thing I used to pride myself on, and I still do, is that at Reach, I know this is a thing that happens in many developing countries and stuff, but we never owe salaries. Like, God forbid that happens. And so like, I remember when, we had, if you're a Nigerian and you know this happens, because my sister was owed 4 months salary. I'm like, how is someone supposed to, like, let the person go. Like, what is this nonsense? Anyway, so I said we never owe salary. So I sat my team down, and that's one thing. Like, they always know where we are. I'm very transparent with my team. I was like, guys, this is where we are. If we don't close XYZ deals by the end of this month, I will tell you, 2 to 3 weeks ahead of time, so that you can actually start looking for jobs so that you are set. And I will do whatever I can to help you find your next job. I have great connections everywhere. I will help you find a job if that's what I must do, but I will not have us, in trouble. And, again, seeds that were planted a long, long, long time ago started coming through. And just at the end of that month, we got this big research project that came through. It was many months worth of research work. And that is actually what has been, driving us even as we entered the lull that was COVID. And so, yes, now we are coming out of that lull, like companies are shifting, strategies are changing, things are looking fantastic. It's going to be great. But I know that, September last year was a really rough time. Yeah.
I mean, and I think that's very real. Entrepreneurship. It's not the glamorized version that we see on social media.
And please don't start a company. I warn all my friends not to start companies. Like, don't do it.
I mean, I think, but in that same breath, the only way that you can really have freedom is by starting a company. I truly think that. So I think that it's kind of like a two-edged sword with that one.
I mean, but if you're not called to it, right, Lily? I think that's the other thing. Like, I don't want to glamorize the freedom either, because there is freedom in having a paycheck, right, and knowing that your money will come every month, right? So if you are called to it, and for me, I really do, as you can tell, I really do feel called to it from when I was 12, right? I do feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So it gives me more than just the joy of having money. It gives me the joy of mission and of changing people's lives and gathering people to do something really awesome. But if it's not your true calling, don't stop what you're doing, to go off and do that.
It's definitely not for everyone. I mean, that's for sure. I think there's space for, all types of people, entrepreneurs as well as entrepreneurs. So I think there's different ways that you can go about that. But cool. Okay, so we're kind of getting to the end of the program. There was a question about your thoughts on Bitcoin. Do you use Bitcoin? Are you, what are your thoughts on Bitcoin?
Okay, so yeah. So that's one of the things that in general, I actually try not to speak about, because I am not knowledgeable about Bitcoin. And because Bitcoin is still relatively new and unregulated, and so in a sense it is, and forgive the background noise, in a sense it is regulated, because it's regulated by everybody, because it's a distributed ledger system, but because it's so hard to explain to the regular person, I tend to shy away from it. So I'd rather that we give time. Sorry to whoever the asker of this question is. I'd rather we give time to a question that doesn't require such deep explanation.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. What I'd actually like you to do is just, because we're running up on time, just what advice do you have for a young person that is, like you, a 12-year-old person or 17-year-old person that has a dream, whether, whether it's to be, an entrepreneur or someone that has a vision, what's your advice to a young person that knows that they want to do something in this life?
So diligence is actually a really good virtue. It will help you throughout your life. And I think you are most tested in your diligence when you are younger. And many people think it's when you're older, but by then, whatever diligence you have is what you carry with you through adulthood. But sitting down and doing that homework when you don't want to do it, knowing that you need to finish, your chores, basically teaching your body and mind to do what you need to do when you need to do it is a skill that just lasts forever. And yes, of course, it is the responsibility of parents to train their kids. But sometimes if you don't have parents who are doing that for you, you need to train yourself. Sometimes even if you do have parents who do that for you, you still need to train yourself. So when you're that young, 17, 18, seek ways to be diligent. There are many ways for that to happen, right? It can be in your academic pursuits, which is one of the clear paths to making something of yourself. But if that is not your path, maybe you're creative. How are you actually showing diligence in your creativity? Not stubbornness, but diligence. And by diligence, I mean you are researching. You're learning how to do your craft at the highest and highest and highest of levels as you go on. You are receiving instruction, whether it's self-directed or otherwise. You are literally finding ways to elevate your game, right, quote unquote, to the best and highest possible levels. I don't care what you're doing, whether it's creative, whether it's academic, whether it's just whatever your hand finds to do. Honestly, do it to the best of your ability, because it is in the doing of it that you build all the foundations you need for that future. It's how you find the people who will eventually support you. It is how you find the people who will come alongside to partner with you and work with you and maybe do a startup with you, right? It is how you eventually find even the person that you will build the rest of your life with on a personal level. So being diligent is actually just a fantastic thing to keep in your pocket.
Okay, that's very good. Very good advice. So we have a question. I think this is going to be the last question I'll take. We have a question here from Ife, who says that so I earn 250,000 naira a month, but I still feel like I'm drowning and that I can't afford the life that I want to live. What advice do you have in terms of starting a side business or saving? So she says that she's earning 250,000 naira a month, but she doesn't feel like it's enough to cover what her life.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have on building a side hustle or something of that sort, multiple streams of income?
Yeah. Okay. So she also said savings. I already gave the savings advice, so I'm hoping she didn't miss that one.
Yeah.
So on the multiple streams of income, there's one of the blogs that I know we put out on Reach. And by the way, if you're not following Reach, you are actually missing out, because our various social media platforms are just giving out really great advice. And one of them, I believe it was a blog that we put out, was talking about how there are skills you have now that you can offer to companies that will pay for them. So maybe you don't have time to go start a whole new business, but a side hustle can be writing, right? Maybe you're good at creating pitch decks or just presentation outlay. That's something you can do for some money on the side. Maybe you're good at building financial models. That's also something you can do for money on the side. Maybe you are good at editing videos or editing audio. Something you can do on your nights and weekends. Maybe you're good at writing code, but you don't do it, for work. Also something you can do nights and weekends. Maybe you're good at editing photos. Maybe so there's actually a lot, but sometimes you don't realize that the skill you have is something that a small company will pay for. Because some people can't afford to have a whole team or one paid staff member for a task, but they don't mind parting with a fraction of what they would pay someone full-time to do this task. So that's I'm thinking that because the way you said it, if it sounds like you already have a job, please look at this, take an inventory of your skills. What are the things that you can do almost in your sleep that you do so well, right? And see if you can actually find small companies that can offer those services to for some kind of, fee.
That definitely makes sense. Multiple streams of income is definitely important, even if you are working 9 to 5 and you want to kind of increase your net worth. Okay, cool. I guess so. I want to talk a little bit about the digital space and technology. This will be my last question before we go off. So obviously, as you know, COVID-19 has almost accelerated the way that the digital world has come. The future of work essentially is here.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for companies or individuals on how they can leverage technology and the digital space to just enhance themselves and their companies?
So I will say something that is potentially controversial.
Okay.
Do not waste a fantastic epidemic. These times only come once in who knows how many decades, right? Potentially even a century. So now is really the time to lean into this reality. The whole thing of we're waiting until things return to normal, just let it go, right? Because we've now just be like Elsa, let it go. We've actually just shown ourselves that you don't need someone to be in the office. So if there's talent that is not near you, but can be, for you, go ahead and pursue that. If there is the opportunity to actually gather minds and have conferences and seminars and all that stuff that you were thinking, it has to be done in person, you can see that it's very different. So how do you actually just keep on? Don't lose this momentum is then what I'm saying. And if you've been waiting for the pandemic to go away so that you can actually, go back to the plan that you had made before, throw the former plan out, because this is the new reality, right? Being comfortable with digital everything is the new reality. So if you're not built for that, it's time to actually start rebuilding. I know that for us, one of the things that was a big blessing was, as a CEO, just having time to think, right? Not being in the office and putting out fires and answering other people's questions, but just having this downtime to think and then rebuild the company from the ground up. So again, don't waste a good pandemic. Don't waste it.
I like that. Don't waste a good pandemic. All right, JR. Well, it's been really nice speaking with you this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
So how, I mean, I know you've told us, we can reach at www.reachafrica.com.
Reach.africa. No, just reach www.reach.africa. Yes.
Okay. All right. And then, follow them on social media, follow JR on social media as well. Thank you so much for your time. We've come, unfortunately, to the end of the program. But it's been really interesting speaking to you just about, your passion for financial literacy and also just spreading that message of being responsible, for your finances from a young age, because that trickles down into the decisions that you make as an adult. And it's also been interesting to speak to you about, your very multifaceted life and career, and trying to connect the dots as to, what you were doing before you were the CEO and co-founder of Reach. So we look forward to, keeping in touch with you as usual, and, keeping up with the things that you do in 2020 and beyond.
Thank you, Lily, and thanks for everyone who had questions and that joined in. We are actually really good about answering questions. So if you didn't get an answer to your question, right, you can find Reach is at Find Reach on all platforms, and I am at JR Kanu on my platforms. So go ahead and just post those questions and you'll get answers. We actually do respond. We do love what we do. Yeah.
That's good. So thank you so much, JR Kanu. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you for being a guest on Scaling Through Crisis.
Thanks, Lily. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. You can end the call. Yeah.
Okay.
I want to do my outro. Yeah. Great. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on another edition of Scaling Through Crisis, brought to you by Business Day Media in partnership with Endeavor Nigeria. So my guest today was JR Kanu, who is the CEO and founder of Reach Africa. He's also the author of Money Brain, Money Management in Your 20s and in Your 30s. So if you're, looking for a kind of a guide on personal finance and just kind of how to navigate being a young adult, I definitely think it's a book that you should try and get. For me, it was super interesting speaking to him. Like I said, he's had a very multifaceted career, that started in engineering, then he went to journalism, a little bit in, e-payments, and then finally with Reach. So again, like he said, you can follow him on social media at JR Kanu, and you can follow Reach on social media as well at Find Reach. So yeah, it's been a great episode of Scaling Through Crisis. Thank you for tuning in. And the next episode will be next Friday, July 10th, 11th. And that is going to be with the company called Bamboo. So essentially they help you invest in the US stock markets from anywhere in Nigeria or on the African continent. So I look forward to that. Thank you for tuning in and have a great weekend.